All right, hey there, and welcome to part 3 of this series on treating pure OCD. My name is Matt Cotty. I'm a licensed clinical social worker down in Southern California. And in part 1 and 2, I really talked about, what is pure OCD, why it's kind of a myth. And then in part 2, I talked about mental compulsions. And in this part, I want to talk about how we do ERP with someone who's experiencing, the quote, pure OCD. Now, again, first and foremost, we need to understand that pure OCD is not just purely obsessional. There's almost always compulsions involved. And the gold standard for treatment when it comes to OCD is something called exposure and response prevention, meaning that you're going to expose yourself to the feared stimulus, and then you're going to prevent yourself from responding in a way, in a compulsive way in this situation, right? But in a way that's going to really reinforce that fear. So the quick example I can give, and the most standard example that we have in the OCD field is the idea of contamination OCD. It's something people are very aware of. And so with contamination OCD, you'll have the person who has a fear of contamination, they get anxious, they wash their hands and get relief. And so ERP for them would look something like, they get the thought about being contaminated, they get anxious, and they prevent themselves from washing their hands to habituate to that anxiety and ultimately not reinforce the fear. And the more and more they don't reinforce the fear, the more they're allowed to face it and then eventually realize that there was nothing to be afraid of in the first place. Now, when it comes to pure OCD, it's a little bit trickier, but this process is still exactly the same. You have the thought, you have the anxiety, and then you have the compulsions. But the compulsions, like I said, are almost always mental. So the person, the individual that's experiencing, these thoughts is going to need to be very clear on what behaviors they do to try to neutralize those thoughts. And then what we have to do is kind of systematically help them eliminate those behaviors kind of one at a time. And so when we talk about things like thought suppression, one of the things is actually allowing the thoughts to be there, right? And not pushing them away. So that's going to be one of the exposures that takes place. And then also that, when we talk about avoidance and not avoiding things that actually trigger those thoughts, those are going to be other exposures. And then we look at the things they do for reassurance. So any kind of reassurance they get. And one of the biggest reassurances that people seek with pure OCD is often from their loved ones. So, I can't tell you how many times I've had moms who have harm OCD and they get reassurance from their significant others or even their children, right? Do you think I'm a good mom? And then when their spouse says, yeah, I think you're a great mom, that helps reassure and alleviate them from those thoughts that they're having, which then reinforces that cycle. So if you do, seek out reassurance, especially from other family members, that's one of those things that you're going to need to eliminate, one of those behaviors you're going to need to eliminate to actually help that habituation process take place. So when it comes to ERP with pure OCD, really the process is exactly the same as any other form of OCD. That's why I don't like to, kind of like subcategorize this, because again, it's all one big cycle that really is the same for every single person. It's really just about figuring out what behaviors you do that reinforce your fear and then really starting to work at eliminating those behaviors, allowing habituation to take place. And then from there, the more and more it takes place, the more and more you're going to realize that all that stuff going on with OCD is just a bunch of noise that you don't need to pay attention to. So hopefully you found this little series of helpful. Again, below this video, I have some links where I have further trainings and resources that will help you out on your journey to recovery from OCD. And if you like this video series, please, again, subscribe to the channel because I release new videos and trainings, and be sure to like it and comment below. So it's been a pleasure to be here with you, and I will see you guys on the next video in the next training series.